So we're a little late because we didn't learn for 2 days. But we're learning Likkutei Sichot Volume 2. We're starting Volume 2.
I was ready yesterday.
I know. Volume 2.
Yeah.
We finished Volume 1. We didn't finish the whole volume, so we didn't do a siyum. Maybe we'll go back next year. Anyway, we're starting Parshas Bamidbar. Page 1. Look at that. There's a page 1 in this book. This book is so new, it's never been cracked open. They have about 10 copies of Volume 2 here. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I guess somebody wants one to teach it or learn it in a group.
They have the whole set here?
Yeah. המצווה הראשונה שבספר במדבר היא למנות את בני ישראל. The first mitzvah in the book of Numbers is to enumerate the children of Israel.
No, not to enumerate. Enumerate means to spell out.
No.
It is
Enumerate
to count
means to count. There's a difference between enumeration and counting. What is the difference? Enumeration means that you also give it a name. It's by name. Meaning that if I have 10 people in a room, I can count them and I can enumerate them. If I count them, it means I just say there's 10 people. If I enumerate them, I say there's Joe and John, and that's how I count them, by name. That's the difference in general. That's why in the Gemara this is actually called the Book of Numbers, the Book of Counting, or the Book of Census. Now, Minyan, counting in general, which here he explains in parentheses. I don't know how it was in the Yiddish, but in Hebrew you definitely have to explain this to a modern Hebrew speaker. Minyan means to count, sfira. Okay. And they try to make this difference between sfira and minyan. That sfira would be like counting without names, and minyan would be with names. So here, that's why they have to write it in parentheses, I think, because it's something that's not related to the content of what you're counting. And it doesn't reveal anything about the essence of what's being counted.
There was some connection because they were all from Shevet Reuven, or they were all from Shevet Levi.
Still,
so there is some connection.
Again, they were counted one by one. They weren't counted by tribe, so it doesn't matter. In the end, within each tribe, but the point here is something a little bit different. We'll see. The point that I wanted to say was this.
Sorry?
I wanted to say something that was actually important. Yes. This was the biggest hindrance to modern science. The fact that counting numbers do not seem to indicate anything about the essence of the object being counted. Right? If I say 2 apples, 3 apples, 4 apples, that doesn't say anything about apples. And if I have an apple that weighs 50 grams, it doesn't say anything about the apple. Anything that has to do with enumeration, with counting, with quantity, is seemingly not connected to quality. It's not connected to essence. It's not connected to nature, the nature of an object, the character of an object. So this was called an external cause, very, very far removed from the essence in Greek thought. And so that was the way that Aristotle pictured it. And that's the way that many, many generations of people studied Aristotle and thought about numbers. The numbers are inherently unconnected to what they count, which is true. The only problem is that if you take that approach, you can't develop modern science. Because modern science is entirely based on quantities. And even though you're right, the quantity doesn't say anything at first, at least at first, because just quantity, just number without dimensions doesn't say anything. The moment you add dimensions, you say this is a kilometer long. I'm not saying it's just 1 long, I'm saying it's 1 meter long, 1 kilometer long. Then I begin to make complex quantities. There are 10 trees per square kilometer here. That begins to tell you something about the essence of the nature of the ground in which they're growing, the type of trees they are. It begins to reveal things. The moment that you add dimensions to quantity. So this is a big deal that we'll see how halacha treats it. Because halacha was always sensitive to the fact that there are things that when you count them, it is meaningful. It never accepted the Aristotelian doctrine that numbers are completely accidental to the meaning. They're not related to the essence of the object being counted. In any case, he begins by saying this. Because everything is counted the same way. הגדול יותר אינו מהווה לגבי המניין יותר מגוף אחד וקטן יותר אינו פחות מגוף אחד. So like we said, if you're counting apples, it doesn't matter if you have a big apple, a small apple, in the end you say I have 12 apples. So המניין אינו מציין כלל חשיבותו של הדבר. Counting cannot reveal the importance of the object being counted. אף התנאי הניתן במניין שברשותנו לגבי מהותם של הנינים שבין 20 שכן הנינים חייבים להיות לא פחותים בגיל 20, אף תנאי זה אינו דבר הבא בהשתדלות האדם ועבודתו. Now he says, here we were counting people who were 20 years and over. So it does say something about their nature, that they're at least 20 years old, right? But he says, even this condition that you count only those people that are 20 years and older is not something that really indicates anything about the person. Why? Because even this idea that he's 20 years old, this fact that he's 20 years old, does not reveal anything essential about him. It happened just because it happens. You just grow. Time passes, so you become 20 years old. It doesn't really reflect anything about what this person is about. Okay?
It expresses a certain amount of maturity.
No, not at all. It can be completely immature. It can be an imbecile. It can be an idiot.
He's got to put on the film.
You can have CP and not have developed even a tiny bit. It doesn't mean anything. You could be a person who cannot put on film because you don't have an arm. I don't know. It really doesn't say anything at all. It happens just because of the passage of time. And when something is just missing time, it's not the same thing as something that's missing an act that needs to be done. So if there's a stipulation that some act needs to be done for a korban to be, for an animal to be put on the altar, that's not the same thing as the animal is too young. It has to grow to be a year old. Because something that is mechusar zman, that immediately will be fixed because time will pass. It's something that needs an action to be taken, that's a completely different thing. That represents already essence. In any case, so since counting here at least is relative, is entirely external, doesn't reflect the essence or the importance of what's being counted. So now it presents a problem about why is this the first mitzvah to count the people when it doesn't reflect anything about them? Why count them? Do something else with them if you want to show their importance, if you want to give them their duties in life, their positions, you want to set them up, right? So you should be doing something else. Why counting?
By the way, how did they count them?
How did they count?
You weren't supposed to count.
It says that Moshe Rabbeinu went up to each tent.
Yeah, that's the Levim. Only with the Levim, it says that.
No,
because they're little babes, so therefore a voice came out there. Oh, he says it right. That's Rashi. I thought that was wrong.
Well, of course I know, because that's how they counted them with the Machatzit HaShekel. Exact shekel. Okay, Halachai, chapter 2. Halachai shedavar shebeminyan lo b'tel. There's a halacha that says, there's a legal stipulation that says something that is countable does not nullify. So, for instance, if I have things that are usually counted, then they won't nullify the same way as something that's not usually counted.
It's things we should purchase by a number. One bottle of whiskey.
I think they call it perishables, right?
One egg. Right. When you go into the supermarket, you buy a kilo of washing powder. You don't buy 1 million grains of washing powder.
Right.
So a bottle of whiskey can never be nullified.
Right. This is also true in kashrus. The very fact that it is counted usually reflects on the importance of this type of object, whatever it is. We said a bottle of whiskey is counted. Because of its importance, every individual sample or example of this type of object is counted separately. נמצא לפי זה שלמרות שאין המניין מבטא תוכנו וחשיבותו של כל פרט, הרי הוא מבטא עם זאת את חשיבות הסוג כולו לגבי סוגים אחרים. So even though this does not show us the counting cannot show us the importance of a single individual specimen, it does reveal the importance of the entire species. So the specimen might not have importance. The counting cannot reflect. So even if when I do count 10 bottles of whiskey, I'm still not saying what kind of whiskey it is. I'm still not saying anything about it. I'm just saying that whiskey is important. The species, the general type, is important. So this still is not a good enough answer to say why were the Jewish people counted. Now, because they're counted, and they're counted many times in this book, 3 times at least. So this reflects the fact that they're important, but still, this doesn't go down to the level of the specimen, doesn't go down to the level of the individual person. נכון אומנם שמן המניין אפשר להבין חשיבותו של כל הסוג, אבל אין מעניין לסימן, הוראה לחשיבותו. ולא סיבה וגורם, אין המניין עושה את החשיבות. And moreover, the counting does not give the importance. The counting does not impart importance on a species even. Certainly not in a specimen. Because it already had that importance, and that's why it's being counted. And so, again, it's the question of why is this the first mitzvah? Why is this the first commandment in this book of Numbers? כך מובן גם ההבדל בין עת שדרכו להימנות לבין כל שדרכו להימנות. There's in the Gemara and Beitza, in the beginning of Beitza, and in the Shulchan Aruch, there's a distinction made between that which is counted and all that is counted. And that and all. What's the difference? Sorry, I'll say it again. That which is counted and anything that is counted. Okay, that and all. And anything. That which is counted is like you're pointing at it and you're saying, this is always counted, no matter what. That is not nullified. That's really when something that is usually counted, so it's called etchadoko, that which is counted. Anything that is countable, there are the references to something that sometimes is counted and sometimes is not. Sometimes is sold by, what's the word? There's a word for it.
Weight?
No.
Or number?
No, by number.
Units.
Units. There's a specific word I'm looking for. I don't remember what it is. Or that sometimes it's not. It's just gross, right? It's just like we have about 144 people. They're called gross. That's what they call. I don't remember what the other one is called. When the opposite of gross is, I guess, net. But when you're doing it in counting, I think there's another specific word for it. In any case, lu haya yitaron. So those things that are anything that is counted, there are opinions that say that it doesn't nullify, but there's opinions that say that it does nullify. לו היה יתרון שדבר שמניין טמון בעצם העובדה שהוא נמנע, לא היה צריך להיות כל הבדל בין עת לבין כל. If the counting was the thing that was imparting the importance, there should not be a difference between that which is counted and anything that is counted. In any case, they should have been in a state where they do not nullify. But that which is counted, everybody agrees that it does not nullify. Meaning, if you have 1 in 100, it won't be nullified to the 100. It will still have its own importance as the single, as the one. But anything that is counted, only some opinions say that it doesn't nullify, but most opinions say that it does nullify. So you see that the counting doesn't help impart importance on what was being counted. השאלה אם הדבר נמנע תמיד או לא, כיוון שהפעם הוא נמנע, אינו צריך להתבטל. יש להוכיח איפה, מכאן, שהיתרון טמון בחשיבותו של גוף הדבר. So we see from this that the importance precedes the act of counting. ואילו המניין אינו משמש על זה סימן חשיבותו. And the counting is only a sign, it only signifies, and it only points at the importance of something that already is important. לפיכך לגבי דבר שנמנע רק לעתים, סובר רבי יוחנן שהדבר בטל, משום שאין לדבר עצמו חשיבות מספיקה. That's why Rabbi Yochanan in the Gemara in Beitza says that such a thing that is sometimes counted and sometimes not, meaning that it doesn't have importance enough to always be counted, does nullify. מתברר איפה, שוב, שכל עניינו של מניין אינו אלא חיצוני בלבד, כיצד אם כן מהווה מצוות המניין מצווה כה יסודית, עד שכל הספר נקרא על שמה חומש הפקודים. So, again, since counting is not important enough to impart, is not strong enough to impart value, quality, importance on something that's being counted, how could it be that this is the first mitzvah? And moreover, how could this be the first mitzvah about after which the entire book is named the book of counting?
How come every single tribe had an exact number?
It's a 0 or a 5 at the end.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that? Someone talk about that?
There's
all the numbers could be divided by 5.
in the end there's 3,550 Jews. We always talk about 600,000. What about these 3,550? So it seems clear that the Torah is not, especially when you're counting things, the Torah is not
Exact?
not just exact. That's not the right word. It's not makpid. How do you say makpid?
Not, oh, there's a word I can't remember. Stringent.
Yeah, it's not stringent. The Torah allows a rounding up and down. It seems clear from the pshat of the Torah, the plain meaning seems to be like that. However, on the other hand, even the fact that it was rounded up or down, and that's how it was written in the Torah, gives it significance. So let's say that the number was really, that Reuven had 35,702. They made it into the 700. So that number, 35,700, became the number that has holy meaning and can be learned in a certain way. To give you another example, many names in the Torah are different from what the people were actually called. Right? The Torah sometimes changes names. There's the way that the Torah says the name and the way the rest of the world says the name. Okay? So which one is true? They're both true. The rest of the world called this person by this name. The Torah changes the name a little and it has a different name. Why? Because it says essentially, in its spiritual, holy essence, this is how the name looks above. The fact that when it comes down, it changes a little, that's also significant. But the Torah always talks about how the name is in its pristine state, where it indicates the very essence of it. So, like this number 37,500, that's the number that represents the essence. Whereas 35,702, that was the reality, but the reality doesn't always, in and of itself, indicate the essence. So that's what we need to think about these things. So, the classic example is that there were 70 offspring of Jacob that went down to Egypt, and when you count, there's only 69. There's all kinds of answers, but the simple pshat is, the plain meaning is that the Torah is rounding up. But there's 69 and it's rounding up. When there's 69, you get this. On the other hand, when there are 70 descendants to Yaqtan, whatever his name was, in Genesis 10, so nobody makes a big deal out of it. There's 70 descendants, the Torah doesn't even count it. It doesn't say that there's 70. You have to count for yourself. Even though it would be a nice round number. So the rounding is when you want to actually count. It's not just that every time somebody shows up, oh, it's a very important number, let's write it out. It's not. It's important when it indicates the essence. So in this case, there were 69 and you rounded it up to 70, so 70 became an important number. Because the Torah decided this is the number that has importance. Okay. So we'll continue God willing next week. And hopefully catch up next week. So we'll finish the first Sichot in 3 days and then continue on the next Sichot with the next part.